Have you ever trusted someone so much that you didn't even consider being betrayed by this person? She trusted. She trusted his eyes when she said, "I love you." I trusted her hugs when I said, "I'm here for everything." I trusted my home, my Christmas, my life. Until, on a freezing dawn, his cell phone vibrated, and all it took was one sentence, 6 words, for my entire reality to fall apart. "Let me know when she's gone." That night, I discovered that the cruelest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from who you call home, of those who know your weaknesses and yet choose to use them against you. It wasn't just my marriage that ended. It was my world, my identity, my story. But this isn't just a story about pain. It's a story about rebirth, about the day Christmas destroyed everything, to show me who I really was. And maybe, when you hear what happened to me, you see parts of your own story as well. Because some wounds don't heal over time. They heal with truth. And today, I'll tell you mine. Until the end. The air in Portland that week before Christmas smelled different. It was as if the cold was not only from the winter outside, but also from what was about to happen inside the Carter house. Emily vividly remembered the snowflakes falling slowly and almost choreographed through the living room window, while the scent of cinnamon and pine filled the room with a false sense of home. Everything seemed perfect at first glance, the lights flickering softly on the decorated tree, the garlands neatly positioned, the presents piled with red ribbons. But inside her, something screamed silently. An unsettling presentiment surrounded her, as if that Christmas was set to be remembered. Not with tenderness, but with tears. All week, Emily tried to silence that nagging intuition. She told herself that it was just tiredness, the result of the end-of-year rushes. But there was something in Michael's eyes that she no longer recognized. He was there, present in body, but absent in essence. The short answers, the quick hugs, the automatic kisses, it all felt rehearsed, as if she were acting in a role she no longer wanted to play. And even without proof, her heart felt it. Because the heart always knows, even when the mind insists on doubting. The nights became longer. Emily stared at the ceiling of the room, listening to her husband's breathing next to her, trying to find some peace in the beating of her own chest. But what he found was a painful mixture of distrust and sadness. She wondered, when did they stop looking at each other deeply? When did the we become he and me? And, more importantly, why? There were no recent fights, no glaring physical distances. It was something more subtle, more sneaky, as if a shadow had crept between the two of them and lodged there, permanently. On Christmas Eve, as snow piled up on Portland's sidewalks and neighbors exchanged warm vows, Emily found herself staring out the window with her eyes fixed but seeing nothing. Her reflection on the window showed a beautiful woman, still young, but with a look that carried an old tiredness. Something inside her wanted to cry, not knowing exactly why. And it was at that moment that a question arose in his mind, as if blown by an invisible force. What can destroy a perfect Christmas in seconds? The answer would come soon, and it would change everything. That night, Emily prepared supper as she did every year, with care and details that have always been her way of saying, "I love you." Michael, however, seemed more and more distant, checking his phone constantly, smiling at messages he didn't show. When Sophie arrived, her best friend, the sister that life gave her, everything seemed a little lighter. But not for long. Emily noticed that the eyes of the two of them met for a second longer than usual. A look she couldn't explain, but that he would feel burning in his chest a few hours later. Supper was served, toasts were made, Christmas songs filled the environment. Everything seemed, once again, perfect. But it was a false perfection, painted over invisible cracks. Emily, smiling at the photos, hugging her family, wishing Merry Christmas in her usual sweet voice. Inside, he was already starting to say goodbye to all that. She still didn't know exactly what, but she felt that night was marking the end of something important. And, deep down, I hoped I was wrong. When everyone went to sleep, the house sank into silence. The kind of silence that scares more than 1,000 screams. Emily lay down next to Michael, but she couldn't close her eyes. The restlessness was a living animal inside her, scratching the walls of her chest. Every sound in the hallway made his heart race. Every flickering light in the room seemed to mock her anguish. Until his cell phone vibrated. It was at that moment that the fine line between trust and doubt was broken. Emily stood still, staring at the device on the dresser. The name, Sophie, flashed on the screen like a mute confession. Doubt burned like red-hot iron. She took a deep breath. I didn't want to know, but I needed to know, because certain messages cannot be ignored. And it was there, between the muffled sound of the vibrating cell phone and the deafening silence of the room, that her Christmas began to crumble. Emily Carter has always been one of those women who seem to carry the world lightly. Born and raised in a small town near Seattle, she moved to Portland at the age of 24, when she landed a position as a marketing manager at a local publishing house. He loved books, quiet cafes, and the feeling of walking on wet sidewalks after the rain. He had a sweet but firm manner. She was the kind of woman who made everyone smile at work, but who cried alone in the car when she left, not out of sadness, but out of oversensitivity. Emily saw beauty where others hurried by. She always believed in love, in true friendship, and that life, even in its darkest curves, was still a place of possibilities. It was on an autumn afternoon, while waiting for an Uber in front of the municipal library, that she met Michael. He had dropped a folder of documents, and she, naturally gentle, bent down to help. Eyes crossed. He laughed, a little embarrassed. She smiled, a little shy. And in that simple exchange began a story that seemed to have been written by some romantic comedy screenwriter. Michael was an architect, worked in a modern office downtown, and loved to talk about the hidden meaning of old buildings. Emily was enchanted by this man who spoke passionately about windows, beams, and foundations. Little did she know that, years later, it would be precisely the foundations of her own marriage that would begin to crumble. 2 years after that meeting, they were married. The ceremony was small, intimate, under a giant tree in a city park. Sophie, the friend she had met at the new job, was godmother. At that time, Emily felt on top of the world. Life went on at a pace she had dreamed of. Coffee together in the morning, laughter on the couch watching series at night, short trips on the weekend. They had plans for children, a bigger house, maybe a dog. She firmly believed that she had found the right man and the right friend. 2 pillars that supported her own little universe. Sophie arrived in Emily's life like a charismatic hurricane. She was fun, intense, loud, and had a laugh that filled any room. The two met at a female leadership workshop, and, since then, they have not been apart. It was almost like a connection of souls. They shared confidences, books, series, and even recipes. Sophie had a peculiar way of looking at life, bolder, more direct, and Emily admired that. They were different, but they complemented each other. For years, she called her the sister that life gave me. It was common to see them together in the city's cafes, laughing, venting, exchanging advice. Michael got used to his friend's constant presence, sometimes even too much. And that's when the first invisible cracks began. Emily, with a pure heart and full of confidence, never suspected that the friendship she valued so much could hide another layer. After all, who could have imagined that the woman who held his hand in difficult times also smiled at her husband with too many eyes? At that time, there was no room for doubt. Emily was the kind of person who believed in good, until life forced her to look at evil very closely. And she was still far from knowing that this would happen. The couple's routine was simple and quiet. Michael left early for work. Emily organized her remote meetings, prepared dinner, took care of the plants, and maintained a small virtual bookstore as a side project. To the outside eye, they were the perfect couple. Social networks showed photos on trips, dinners, birthdays. But, like any frozen image, they hid movements that no one saw. Love, over time, ceased to be a movement and became a portrait. A beautiful portrait, but increasingly lifeless. Despite the recent silences, Emily was still making plans. She had written down in her notebook that next year she wanted to start a creative writing course, maybe even write a children's book. I imagined a story about a girl who collected stars and learned to shine again after a great loss. Little did she know that the star that would go out in her own life was about to fall, and that in order to continue living, she would have to find another way to turn on its light. What Emily didn't know, as she walked through the house with woolen socks and a cup of hot tea in her hands, was that trust, once broken, is like shattered glass. Even if you try to pick the pieces together, it will never be the same again. And yet, it was in this sweet and almost naive belief that she followed her days. He thought that love was enough, that loyalty was unquestionable, and that, with effort, everything would work out. But life always finds a way to prove that, sometimes, what you protect the most is precisely what betrays you the most. Emily always said that loving Michael was like living in a place with a view of the sea. Even on cloudy days, it was still worth it. In the early years, their relationship was made up of a charming routine. Notes in the mirror, spontaneous hugs in the kitchen, breakfasts with pancakes and eyes that searched for each other even in silence. Michael was the kind of man who listened more than he talked, and that, at first, was precisely what delighted Emily the most. She talked about his dreams and fears, and he listened carefully that it gave security. They looked like two adults determined not to repeat the mistakes they saw in broken marriages around them. But time, that invisible sculptor, began to redraw the contours of the relationship. Gradually, passion became habit, habit became tiredness, and tiredness, it has become a distance. It wasn't suddenly, there were no big fights or slamming doors. It was subtle, like everything that corrodes slowly. Emily noticed that the dinners had become quieter, that Michael no longer heard her with the same vibe, and that her jokes, once irresistible, now received only brief smiles. She tried to rekindle the flame, but he always had an excuse: work, stress, fatigue. And she, like so many women, gave in to the dangerous thought that maybe this was normal. One of the things that hurt the most was the fact that Michael was still a good man in the eyes of others. Hard-working, polite, kind. But inside the house, Emily felt that he was only present in the role of husband. The affection, the attention, and the sparkle of his eyes no longer lived there. Intimacy has become rare. The conversations became shallower. And although they still slept in the same bed, Emily felt alone as someone in a windowless hotel room. The connection that once bound them together now looked like a sewing thread unraveling at the ends. There were times when she wondered if it was her mistake. Maybe he had put too much effort into his work, or he wasn't as interesting as he once was. He began to charge himself for small things: the way he dressed, the frequency of dinners for two, the lack of new ideas to surprise him. Emily wanted to believe that there was still time to rescue love. That if she tried a little harder, she could recover that man who looked at her as if she were fate itself. But what she didn't realize was that, many times, those who move away have already decided to leave. They just haven't found a convenient excuse yet. Michael's behavior changed subtly in the months leading up to Christmas. He began to take longer at work, to smile less at home, to answer messages with increasing delays. When she asked what was wrong, he always dodged, saying that everything was fine. But Emily noticed his eyes wandering away even when they were face to face. And that hurt more than any scream. It was as if Michael was living another story, and she only appearing as a secondary character. Among the gestures that now seemed suspicious were the long showers with the door locked, the cell phone always facing down, the calls he answered in the hallway, and the muffled laughter when he thought no one was listening. Emily didn't want to be the jealous, controlling wife. He fought against the urge to snoop. He preferred to trust, or at least pretend to trust, because the alternative was too painful, and she wasn't ready to face that pain yet. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any words, and Michael's silences began to scream inside the Carter's house. He no longer asked how her day was. I no longer understood when she changed her haircut. I didn't see the notes she left fondly next to the coffee maker. Emily was there, whole, available, loyal. But him. He seemed to be further and further away, even sitting next to her on the couch. And that kind of loneliness, within a marriage, is a slow poison. You get sick inside, until I forget who I was before the pain. And even with all this, Emily still believed she could fix it. She was the type to fight to the end, maybe even after the end. He didn't want to give up the history he built, the vows he made, the house he decorated with so much love. She just didn't know that, while she was trying to save what was left, Michael had already given his heart to someone else. And worse, this other person was closer than she could have imagined. Sophie Miller was the kind of woman who walked into a room and changed the temperature. He had a magnetic presence, a fearless way of speaking and laughing out loud, as if he didn't ask permission to exist. He just existed. Emily met her in a women's leadership course, promoted by the publishing house where she worked. From the first moment, the connection was automatic. Sophie had the gift of making people feel important, heard, seen. And Emily, so sensitive and generous, quickly took her in as a sister of the soul. The ones you think life sent you as compensation for everything you lacked. In the first years of friendship, they were inseparable. Weekly lunches, confidences exchanged by messages until late hours, advice on everything, from what dress to wear to what attitude to take in marriage crises. Sophie was bold, modern, spoke of shameless sex, of work with ambition, and of a hungry life. Emily was more dreamy, reserved, with that heart that ponders before exploding. And precisely this difference made them complete each other as pieces of an unlikely puzzle. In the eyes of all, it was beautiful to see. Two strong women, walking together, cheering each other on. Or at least that's what it seemed. Sophie frequented Emily's house often. I knew every corner, every routine, every look. I drank coffee from the same mug as always, laughed with Michael on the couch, helped put up the Christmas tree every year. It was that constant presence, too good to be questioned. Emily trusted her with her eyes closed. He even joked that if something happened to her, Sophie should take care of Michael. What a bitter irony. Today, each of these memories is like a spinning knife in the chest. Because it wasn't just friendship that was hidden in Sophie's gestures. It was something else. Something that Emily, at the time, did not have the maturity to realize. In retrospect, the clues were there. Small, almost invisible, but present. Like the day Sophie showed up with Michael's favorite perfume as a playful gift, or when she suggested that he help her with a renovation of the apartment, without Emily's presence. Or even, the looks that lasted a second longer than they should. At the time, everything was filtered through the lens of trust. Emily saw no malice, because she did not expect her from someone so close. And deep down, when we love deeply, we become blind to certain signs. We prefer to believe that we are exaggerating than to admit that we are being betrayed. But a woman's eyes don't lie to herself for long. Emily began to feel an unnamed discomfort. Sophie no longer seemed so light. There were times when she made subtle comments about Michael, praising his kindness, his style, his patience. Small needles dressed up in admiration. Emily, gentle as always, smiled and turned away. But something in her trembled inside. It was the kind of feeling that settles before the storm. You don't see it yet, but you feel the heavy air, the skin crawling, the silence becoming unbearable. The friendship, which was previously spontaneous, now seems choreographed. Sophie showed up at odd hours, brought desserts for no reason, asked if Michael would be home. Emily noticed, but didn't confront her. I preferred to suffocate the discomfort with the excuse of stress, routine, natural approach. It was Sophie, after all. Your friend. Your confidant. The one who was by her side when her mother got sick, when she had an anxiety crisis at work, when she lost a baby at the beginning of pregnancy. How can we be suspicious of someone who was present in the most fragile moments? And that's precisely what makes this type of betrayal even more cruel. It comes dressed in care, laughter, shared memories. Sophie knew exactly where she stepped. He knew Emily's weaknesses, her values, her insecurities. I knew how much she valued loyalty, how much she gave herself in relationships. And he used all this as a shield. Every gesture of approach to Michael was camouflaged under the veil of friendship. And Emily unknowingly fed the snake that grew in her garden. Today, looking back, Emily manages to list all the clues clearly. But at that time, she preferred to believe that the evil would not come from someone she herself called sister. But life, always so ironic, loves to teach in the most bitter way. And that friendship, which seemed one of the most solid pillars of his life, was about to crumble. What Emily didn't yet know was that Sophie wasn't just complicit in Michael's emotional distance. She had been, for months, the main cause of it. Christmas has always been Emily's favorite time. Since she was a child, she believed that December had a glow of its own, an energy of fresh start mixed with hope. It was that time of year when she gave herself most intensely to the home. She decorated every corner with almost maternal care, made gingerbread cookies, lit scented candles, and put Christmas music on the ambient sound even on ordinary days. But that year, it all seemed strange. Nothing fit like before. She tried to force the Christmas spirit, but inside her there was a constant echo of something unsaid, of something not right. It was as if I was living inside a Christmas card torn from the inside. The assembly of the tree, for example, was a bitter experience. Michael, who used to participate excitedly, this time limited himself to taking the boxes out of the garage and sitting on the couch, distracted by his cell phone. When she asked for help to put the star on top, he said he was tired. It was a simple gesture, but it hurt as if it had torn a tradition from her heart. Emily kept smiling, putting the ornaments one by one, but inside the pain mixed with the decoration. With each ball hanging, a sigh. With each tape rolled up, a question I didn't have the courage to ask. And then came Sophie, as she always did. But this time, he appeared more often and less invited. I brought wine, I brought cake, I brought funny stories, always with a timing that seemed calculated. Emily, out of politeness, smiled and accepted. But something in his eyes began to observe more than react. Sophie made subtle comments about how Michael was more handsome lately, or how he had a rare taste in married men. Emily disguised her discomfort with a dry laugh, but inside her, something trembled. It was that kind of discomfort that only women perceive because it comes from within, from the intuition that never sleeps. The days were shortening, and the house was filled with lights at the same time that Emily's heart darkened. The nights came cold, silent, and the sofa once shared was now lonely territory. Michael was distracted by games on his cell phone, late-night work meetings, or long trips to the market that, strangely, took longer than usual. When he returned, he came with bags too small for so much time away. Emily asked light questions, testing the atmosphere, but always received evasive answers, as if he threw smoke into the air so as not to be seen. In the kitchen, while stirring caramel sauces or assembling decorative plates for supper, she wondered all the time, "Is it me? Am I exaggerating? Because the cruelest thing about doubt is when it infiltrates one's own self-esteem. Emily began to doubt her own perception, her own sanity. But the evidence was everywhere, not in the form of explicit proofs, but in micro gestures, silences, absences. She began to feel that she was being excluded from a conversation that was happening around her. And it killed her inside. There were also those present. Michael, who always carefully chose the packages and cards, seemed uninterested. He said he would buy everything online, that he didn't have time. Emily offered help. He refused. When she asked if he had already chosen something for his mother, he simply said, "Leave it for later." And this, "leave it for later," sounded like a sentence. Because a man who postpones gifts at Christmas. Maybe you've already gifted someone else with what matters most, your attention. And then, on the night Sophie showed up with an early gift, something in Emily quietly exploded. It was a book of poems that Michael had mentioned months earlier, a peculiar taste that few people knew he had. Sophie said it was just a memory, but the look they exchanged gave away more than any words. Emily, unable to explain, felt as if she had been pushed out of her own story, as if she was just there as a spectator of something that the two already knew, but pretended not to know. Still, she continued with the preparations. She put garlands on the doors, wrapped gifts for her nephews, separated the wines, put together Christmas playlists. It was a desperate attempt to maintain control, to preserve the image she fought so hard to sustain, that of a happy wife, an impeccable hostess, a woman who had everything under control. But with each detail of the decoration, a tear attached. With each flicker of the lights, a painful certainty. Something was about to collapse. And inside her, the question whispered louder each night. Am I being betrayed before my own eyes? The dawn in Portland was cold as only December can be. Outside, snow covered the rooftops in silence, as if the whole world had been swallowed up by a deep stillness. Inside the house, everything was plunged into darkness. The lights of the tree twinkled slowly, reflecting off the wall with a beauty that night, seemed almost melancholy. Emily woke up not knowing why. The kind of awakening that doesn't come from a noise, but from an intuition. He looked at the digital clock on the table. 2:17 a.m. He tried to go back to sleep, but it was then that he heard the sound. A soft, almost imperceptible buzz, but enough to make your heart race. Michael's cell phone vibrated. She glanced at him, lying next to him, breathing deeply. His back was turned. The cell phone vibrated for the second time, and then for the third. Emily stood motionless for a few seconds, her body tense, her eyes fixed on the device illuminated by the screen. She had never touched her husband's cell phone. Never. Trust has always been his foundation. But at that moment, something inside her broke. It was as if all the confused feelings of the last few weeks condensed into that sound, a warning not only of the device, but of life. She didn't know what she would find, but he knew that if he didn't look, he wouldn't be able to sleep anymore, nor to live in peace. He approached slowly, almost without breathing, as if he were about to cross a sacred border. The phone was unlocked, something rare for Michael, who normally used a password. It was as if fate had opened the door. The notification was still there, shining in small print. The name, Sophie. The message, let me know when she's gone. Emily's world came to a standstill. The sound of the heater became distant. The flickering of the lights lost its rhythm. Time itself seemed to split in two, before that message, and everything that would come after. She didn't know how to react. His hands trembled. Her chest seemed too small to contain her unbalanced heart. The mind was trying to find logical explanations. Maybe it was another Sophie, maybe it was a joke, maybe. But all these possibilities faded as I read the rest of the conversation. The previous messages, the emojis exchanged, the ambiguous phrases that now sounded like disguised statements. Emily read everything. Each line, every quick answer from Michael, each silence full of meaning. It was like watching a horror movie in which the protagonist is you, and the monster lives inside your house. The cell phone vibrated again. Another message. Another blow. She got up carefully, took the device to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the cold ceramic floor. I needed to breathe. I needed to understand. He read and reread the messages, as if, at some point, he could find a less painful way out. But there wasn't. The words were clear. The complicity, evident. The desire, wide open. Michael and Sophie were holding something that was no longer just suspicious. It was real. He was alive. And it was cruel. The betrayal came with signature and punctuation. Sitting there, hugging her knees, Emily felt the weight of truth crush her chest. He didn't cry right away. She was paralyzed, as if the body first needed to accept that it was really being broken inside. The bathroom, which had always been her refuge for moments of self-care, was now the scene of a collapse. The scented candles on the shelf, the lavender diffuser, the shag rug, everything seemed to mock what she felt. It was a violent contrast between the aesthetics of a home and the chaos that was established in the soul. She tried to get up, but her legs were weak. She held the sink, looked at the mirror, and almost didn't recognize herself. His eyes wide, his expression pale, his mouth half open as if he tried to scream and couldn't. Still, she didn't want to wake Michael. Not there. Not now. Something inside her said that she still needed time. I needed to organize what I felt before I exploded. Because it wasn't just a love betrayal. It was also the breaking with a friendship that she considered sacred. It was a double stab wound, one in the chest, one in the back. Emily went back to her room. She lay next to him as if she knew nothing. But now the whole body was screaming. His smell, the sound of breathing, the space he occupied in bed. Everything was unbearable. She closed her eyes and tried to control her tears. But a tear flowed, silent, washing not only her face, but the image she made of herself as a beloved woman, as a faithful friend, as a secure wife. It was the beginning of the end. And she knew that, from then on, nothing would be the same. And as the night continued outside, with snowflakes descending on Portland as if nothing was happening, Emily felt Christmas crumble inside her. Because there are dawns that do not bring rest, they bring revelations. And that morning, Emily Carter's life turned into shards of glass that she still didn't know how to collect. The sentence seemed simple, short, informal. But there, hidden in 6 seemingly banal words, was the trigger that would implode an entire life built with care. Let me know when she's gone. Emily reread the message more than 20 times. It hurt more and more. The first reading brought the shock, the second, the confirmation, and the third, mourning. Because that was exactly it. At that moment, she began to mourn a marriage, a friendship, an entire identity that she no longer knew where it began or ended. The message didn't need context. There was no way to misinterpret it. Sophie wasn't talking about a friend. He was talking about an intruder. And Emily was that intruder, inside their own home. She read the whole history, the past conversations, the sneaky emojis, the internal nicknames, the jokes with double meanings. The kind of intimacy that is only built with intention. The dates matched those days when Michael said he was overwhelmed. The messages confirmed what Emily had already felt in her body for weeks, but she didn't have the courage to name. The two were together. And it was not a recent flirtation. It was something that already had a history. They had codes. They had meetings disguised as coincidence. They had a covenant, and the covenant included removing it. The cruelest thing was the coldness of the message, the absence of guilt. Sophie didn't write, "How is she?" or "Are you sure she left?" No. She just wanted to be warned. Like someone waiting for the end of one shift to take the place of the other. It was inhumane. And what hurt even more was knowing that Emily never had a chance to suspect it. Because she was too busy taking care of the house, the wedding, the friendship, everything, except herself. And now, there, with the cell phone in my hands, I felt that all that had been in vain. The images began to emerge in the mind with brutal sharpness. The dinners where Sophie praised Michael's seasoning. The times she insisted on helping in the kitchen to relieve Emily. The eyes that crossed each other too quickly. The jokes that seemed innocent, but now turned out to be rehearsed. Emily saw everything as if she were reviewing a play of which she was the deceived protagonist. And this mental revision was more painful than any screaming. Because now she knew she wasn't paranoid. That it was not an exaggeration. That his intuition was right from the beginning. Emily's hands began to sweat. She let her phone slip into her lap, while the room seemed to slowly spin around. I wanted to scream, wake Michael up, throw everything in his face. But he couldn't. Because the kind of pain she felt isn't noisy. It's a dense silence that holds you inside. It was the silence of someone who loses everything, but has not yet found the strength to react. It was the pause before the collapse. A fraction of time where the body tries to survive before the soul begins to sink. That morning, Emily didn't cry like in the movies. There was no dramatic scene in front of the mirror, no words spoken out loud. She just stood there, sitting on the bed, staring at the erased screen of her cell phone, as if she could erase that reality as well. But it couldn't. The truth had been told. Not with voices, but with lyrics. Not with gestures, but with messages. And now there was no going back. She was no longer the same. The marriage was no longer the same. Life would never be the same. Her heart was beating so hard that she thought she was going to faint. But instead, she kept quiet. He took a deep breath. He wrapped himself in the blanket and turned his back to Michael. He pretended to sleep. He pretended to breathe calmly. He pretended that everything was still the same as before. Because at that moment, I didn't know what to do. I just knew that I didn't want to break everything at once. I needed to understand. I needed to find some logic. In that chaos, he needed to feel the ground again under his feet. But everything around him was shattered glass. And it was in this state of emotional numbness that she spent the rest of the night. The body in bed, the soul in the abyss. And Christmas, which should be the brightest time of the year, was now just a memory stained by a phrase she would never forget. A phrase that would come to haunt his thoughts like a perverse echo. Let me know when she leaves. The silence of that morning was crueler than any scream. The shy winter sun came in through the cracks in the window, illuminating the room where Emily pretended to sleep next to a man who was now a stranger. The cell phone was back on the dresser, but the words she had read still vibrated inside her like a siren. It was like carrying dynamite in her chest. Any false thought could make her explode. Her mind swirled in cycles, trying to understand. Since when did this start? Was it my fault? I really didn't notice. Why her? Why just her? But there was no answer that would calm the chaos. Only sharp questions, cutting inside like invisible razors. The pain of betrayal didn't just come from the act. It came from the deception. Emily began to mentally replay the last few months, as an emotional detective reviewing a crime scene where she was the victim and accomplice at the same time. Accomplice for having ignored the signs, for having trusted too much, for having given my heart to those who did not know how to care. He remembered lazy Sundays, family lunches, quick weekend trips, moments that now looked like fake montages of a movie staged by two traitors. Every memory, a blow, every smile from the past, now a cruel provocation. She tried to hold back her tears, but her body did not obey. Tears flowed even when his eyes were closed. His heart was racing for no apparent reason. Breathing failed between confused thoughts. It was like drowning inside your own room. Emily got up and went to the bathroom in silence. He looked in the mirror and saw a woman who looked older, more tired, more fragile than the day before. But there was also something new there, a harder, more attentive look, as if the pain was making room for something deeper. Lucidity. Even surrounded by sadness, Emily began to observe the reactions of her own body. I noticed the tightness in my stomach, the sweat in the palms of my hands, the tension in my jaw. It was as if her whole system had been trying to warn her for a long time, and she hadn't listened. The betrayal was not only emotional, it was also physical. His energy, his joy, his confidence, it was all slowly draining. And now, with the truth wide open, his body reacted like someone freed from a spell. He took slow but conscious steps. She knew that something inside her had changed forever. The hardest question to face was, should I confront them now? The mind wanted immediate revenge. But the heart, his heart was in ruins. And at the same time, a part of her wanted to believe that there was some explanation. That maybe it was just a loose message. That Michael would deny. That Sophie would cry and ask for forgiveness. That everything could, in some magical way, be restored. But deep down, Emily knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And when two people choose to betray you in silence, it's not just a failure, it's a project. The feeling of deception was the worst part. Sophie knew all the details of Emily's life. He knew his insecurities, his fears, his past wounds. He knew of the times when Emily questioned whether it was still enough for Michael. And yet, even though he had all this information, he chose to hurt her at the most sensitive point. This was not just disloyalty, it was wickedness. Emily felt as if she had been emotionally violated, as if someone had entered her soul and stolen what was most sacred to her, her trust. And then came the flashbacks. Those moments that seemed random before, but now took on a new meaning. The time Sophie mentioned dreaming about Michael, and they laughed together. The joke about sharing the husband at a barbecue. The look she thought were distracted, but now seemed too intimate. It all made sense. Everything hurt. Emily felt like she was reliving a horror movie where the main character is the last to know, and the whole audience is already screaming for her to wake up. That day, she still hasn't screamed. She hasn't broken anything. She hasn't confronted anyone yet. But inside, a cry was beginning to grow. A cry that was not only of anger, but of liberation. Because the worst had already been discovered. And although she didn't know what she was going to do yet, Emily knew one thing. She would never be the same woman again. Innocence was over. And now, a new version of her was preparing to be born. In the midst of the shards, in the middle of Christmas, Emily spent the next few days living between two realities. On the outside, she was the serene, gentle wife who finished the Christmas preparations with a smile on her face and sweet words on her lips. Inside, she was a detective in a minefield, calculating every step, every word, every look. Sophie's message had turned into a lens. Everything that had previously gone unnoticed now gained defined contours. The way Michael responded hastily to messages, the twinkle in Sophie's eyes as she entered her house, the rehearsed silences between the two of them, it all felt like part of a carefully staged script, where she had been the only one not given the script. She began her investigation not as someone seeking revenge, but as someone who needs to rescue her own sanity. At first, he hesitated. Messing with his cell phone again seemed too invasive. But after the first discovery, what was once taboo became a matter of emotional survival. He scoured the backups of conversations, old emails, cloud photos, all done with extreme care, so as not to arouse suspicion. Emily realized that, contrary to what many people think, betrayal is not hidden in grand gestures. It lives in the details. In the times that don't match, in the messages deleted in a hurry, in the smiles that last too long to be innocent. He remembered one particular weekend in October when Michael traveled to an architecture conference. She was left alone at home, tending the garden and finishing an important report. At the time, he thought it was normal. Now, he revisited that memory with new eyes. He found a ticket bought to another city, different from the one he had mentioned. And in his computer's browsing history, the check-in of a romantic hotel in Seattle, 2 days after the supposed conference. Her heart froze. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was also geographical. She had been deceived on every possible level. Each discovery led to another. It was like pulling a loose thread and seeing the whole fabric of trust unravel before your eyes. Sophie, in turn, had also left traces. On social media, Emily noticed old comments that once sounded friendly but now looked like flirtations in disguise. A photo in which Michael appeared from the back, in a cafe that, coincidentally, Sophie had also attended on the same day. 2 small coincidences not to be noticed. Emily began to put the puzzle together, and each piece fitted together hurt like a stab. The hardest thing was to maintain the facade. Michael kept acting as if nothing was happening. He kissed his forehead, asked about dinner, made jokes at breakfast. Sophie, on the other hand, was still the solicitous friend, with wide smiles and unexpected gifts. Emily watched that staging as if witnessing a crime in slow motion. With every gesture, every speech, every visit, she felt her heart tighten. But he resisted, because now he had a purpose: to discover everything. No impulsive confrontations. No uncontrolled explosions. She wanted the whole truth, and most of all, she wanted to regain control of her own story. During the early hours, Emily wrote. He took an old notebook and began to record everything. Dates, behaviors, suspicions, messages. It was his silent war diary. Each written page served as an anchor so as not to go crazy. It was a way of organizing pain, of naming chaos. There, between scribbles and silent tears, she began to understand the size of the blow. And more than that, he began to see himself with different eyes. She realized that, even betrayed, she was still capable of acting clearly, with dignity, with intelligence. The betrayal did not turn her into a passive victim. It turned her into a strategic observer. Connecting the dots was more than understanding the past. It was also about seeing the future. Emily knew the moment of confrontation would come, but she didn't want to do it blindly. I wanted to be ready. I wanted the words to come out with the strength of someone who knows exactly what he is saying. He wanted that, when the truth was thrown on the table, there would be no room for lies, nor for lame excuses. And, above all, I wanted Michael and Sophie to understand that they underestimated the wrong woman. And so, on that Christmas Eve frozen inside, Emily was no longer just a betrayed wife. She became a woman in the process of rebirth. The pain was still unbearable, of course. But now there was purpose. There was focus. There was strength sprouting slowly, in the midst of the rubble. And what would come next? It would not be a request for an explanation. It would be a reckoning with the truth. December 24th dawned white in Portland. The snow covering the streets seemed to want to disguise the war about to take place inside the Carter's house. The facade was still the same. Flashing lights on the roof, the aroma of nutmeg in the kitchen, gifts arranged under the tree. But inside, Emily was about to explode. I had already gathered all the evidence, analyzed all the messages, written down each date, each gesture. What began with silent doubt was now a stark certainty. And she knew there was no more room for pretense. Their Christmas, the one that was supposed to be one of peace, was about to become the stage of an incinerating truth. Michael was in the living room, sitting on the couch with his laptop on his lap, reviewing something he said was urgent from the office. Emily watched him for a few seconds from the door, unnoticed, and for the first time he felt no love. He felt sorry, not by him, by herself, for having loved someone so much that he had the courage to cheat on her with the person she trusted the most. She walked up to him with calm steps. He sat in the armchair next to him. There was no more anger in her eyes, just a painful lucidity. And it was like that, without screaming, without a scene, without theater, that she began, "Michael, how long have you been with Sophie?" The impact was immediate. He froze. He didn't blink. He did not answer. It just paralyzed. Those 2 seconds of silence said it all. Emily knew. The silence of a man who has been caught is more eloquent than any justification. He tried to laugh, then feigned surprise, then armed himself with indignation. He said that she was exaggerating, that she was paranoid, that she would never expect this kind of accusation from her. But Emily didn't back down. "I was prepared." He took out his cell phone, showed the messages, the prints, the dates. He showed that he knew everything. And then, in a firm voice, he said, "I'm not asking. I'm giving you a chance to be a man." For the first time in a long time. Michael got up, walked around the room as if looking for a way out, but there was none. There were just the two of them. The whole house was silent, the lights of the tree flashing like witnesses. He rubbed his hands over his face, sat down again, and then, with a defeated sigh, he confessed. Yes, he and Sophie were getting involved. It started unintentionally, according to him. A natural approach, a distraction, an escape. He tried to justify himself by saying that the marriage was cold, that he felt ignored, that Sophie understood him. Emily just listened, in silence, because there is no justification for what was done with premeditation. She then spoke, not with fury, but with dignity. He said he trusted him, who defended his name, who blamed himself for months trying to save a marriage he had already buried in secret. She said that the betrayal hurt, but that the worst thing was that she had been made a fool of for so long. That the fact that he had chosen Sophie was what turned everything into a nameless cruelty. And that the man she married no longer existed, perhaps never was. Michael tried to ask for forgiveness, cried. He said he was confused, that it was his fault. But Emily knew it wasn't confusion. It was cowardice. At that moment, there was no room for reconciliation. There was no hug. There was no relief. There was an emotional separation sealed with the same intensity with which a piece of paper is torn in half. Emily stood up, looked around, watched the house she had built so lovingly. And then, with the firmness of someone who decides for himself for the first time in a long time, he said, "This is going to be our last Christmas together." Michael tried to protest, saying it was a rash decision, that they could talk calmly after the parties. But Emily had already chosen. Christmas would not be the stage for pretense. The supper would be just another reminder of the hypocrisy of the last few months. The gift she would give herself was liberation. And even if it hurt, even if the ground seemed slippery, she knew she would rather walk alone with truth than accompanied by lies. And so, with suppressed tears and a pain that only those who have been betrayed by two loves understand, Emily went up to the bedroom, closed the door, and lay down on the bed. For the first time since the beginning of everything, she slept with a certainty that, even shattered, there was still something intact inside her, her dignity. And that would be the spark of the next step. The phone rang at 10 a.m. on the 25th. Sophie. Emily was already expecting. After the conversation with Michael, I knew she would call, trying to understand what had been said, trying to control the narrative. Emily answered in a firm voice, showing no shock. On the other side, Sophie used her usual sweet tone, as if nothing had happened. Is everything okay? Michael sent me a strange message. I was worried. The audacity of the pretense made Emily smile, but not humorously, indignantly. She took a deep breath and replied, Sophie, come home. Now. We need to talk. Alone. 30 minutes later, Sophie was knocking on the door of the house she had frequented for years. She was made up, well-dressed, her face set up with the expression of someone who knows nothing. But when he met Emily, he knew. I learned that I had been discovered. Emily wasted no time beating around the bush. He sat down at the table, pointed to the opposite chair and began, I've read everything. The messages, the dates, the meetings. I know everything, Sophie. Now you have two options. You can lie to me, once again, or you can speak the truth once and for all. Sophie's face turned pale. Her hands trembled, but she tried to hold her pose. He said it was a mistake, that he didn't want to, that things got out of control. He tried to justify it as neediness, as emotional confusion. Emily listened, but nothing that was said really came in. She watched the woman sitting in front of her, the one who had once been her best friend, confidant, almost sister, and could no longer recognize her. The voice was the same, the mannerisms too, but the essence had become something bitter and cold. Emily then asked the question that hurt the most. Since when? Sophie hesitated. He looked down. He tried to change the subject. But Emily insisted. And then came the answer. Since April. 8 months. 8 months of hidden kisses, disguised encounters, lies told with smiles. Sophie revealed that at first it was unintentional, that she felt guilty, that she tried to walk away, but that Michael kept coming back. And she, except, as if that were excuse enough. Emily listened to everything with a heavy heart, but an upright posture. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. She was there to hear the truth to the end. The cruelest moment came when Sophie said, in a low voice, I fell in love with him. This phrase fell like a bomb, not only for the pain, but for the shameless confession. She didn't seem regretful. She seemed tired of pretending, as if that revelation was a personal relief. Emily felt the world spin, but she stood firm. Because now, more than ever, I needed to leave that conversation with my head held high. He stood up, looked Sophie in the eye and said firmly, You were the person I trusted the most. You knew everything about me. And yet, he chose to stab me in the back. This is not passion. This is cowardice. Sophie tried to touch his hand. I don't want your apology. I don't want justifications. I want distance. You destroyed everything. Was what I was to you real? Or just convenience until you get close to him? Sophie didn't answer. He lowered his eyes. The silence was the loudest confirmation Emily could receive. Needing nothing else, Emily pointed to the door. The old friend hesitated, as if expecting an unlikely forgiveness. But there was no room for compassion at that moment. Sophie left the house without saying a word. And as she closed the door, Emily felt like she was closing a cycle. A rotten cycle, full of lies, illusions, and open wounds. At that moment, she sat on the living room floor, hugged her knees, and cried. Not for Michael, not for Sophie, but for herself. For everything he believed in. For everything he built with love and saw crumble with coldness. Christmas, until then a symbol of unity and hope, became the mark of his greatest disappointment. But, in the depths of that crying, there was something new emerging. No more illusion. Now it was anger. Now it was strength. Now it was survival. The day after the confrontation with Sophie, Emily woke up with her body tired, but with clearer thoughts. His head throbbed, his stomach turned, and his eyes burned with suppressed crying. But, deep down, there was a strange serenity. Not because the pain was gone, it was still there, alive, pulsating, but because the truth was now whole. Even painful, it liberates. Emily knew there were still loose ends, and deep down, there was still one question that did not leave her alone. What else were they hiding? Her intuition, which until then had been her compass, whispered that the betrayal went beyond kisses and messages. Michael, after the confrontation, was reclusive. He had left home that same night with few words, carrying only a backpack. He didn't say where he was going. He didn't try to explain himself again. It just came out, and that, in itself, was already an answer. But on the third day of silence, he sent a short message asking to talk. Emily, against her will, accepted. Not because he expected a new beginning, but because he needed to end with all the cards on the table. I had to face every last thorn in that story to be able to blossom again one day. They sat in the room with the coldness of two strangers. He looked thinner, paler. He avoided her gaze. After a few seconds of silence, he was direct. Me and Sophie. We were planning to tell her after New Year's Eve. Emily didn't react. I was prepared. He continued. We were going to wait for the holidays to pass. We didn't want to ruin his Christmas. The sentence was like a slap. We didn't want to ruin your Christmas. As if the betrayal hadn't already done it on its own. As if planning a confession after the holidays was some kind of consideration. Emily stared at Michael for a few seconds and asked, So you've already decided to be together? And that's when the revelation came that she wasn't ready to hear yet. We've been together for months. Sophie. She's pregnant. The world turned. The words were stuck in the air like bullets not fired. Emily felt her heart stop for a second. Pregnant. Sophie. The best friend. The woman who held his hand on the worst days. The one who knew that she tried to get pregnant for 2 years and couldn't. The same woman who made jokes about being the aunt of the children Emily dreamed of having. Now, she would be a mother herself, of her husband's son. Emily didn't cry. It did not collapse. It just froze. It was as if the body had shut down to avoid a collapse. Michael tried to continue. He said it was unexpected, that they were still deciding what they would do. But in his eyes, there was something Emily had never seen so clearly. Indifference. He was no longer divided. I had already made the choice. And she, Emily, was no longer part of that equation. All that was left now was formality. Signatures. Division of assets. Official separation. And the pain. A pain that would not be shared with anyone. Emily heard everything. In silence. At the end, he just said, You destroyed our history. And she helped bury it. He got up, went to the shelf, took an envelope with documents he had prepared days before. He handed it into his hands. It's all there. Divorce. The list of items. The car key. He received it without protest. He just nodded. And then, before leaving, he turned to her and said, I'm sorry. But at that point, the I'm sorry was no longer good for anything. It was just another empty sentence in the middle of a story full of lies. When the door closed, Emily collapsed. He didn't cry loudly. He didn't scream. But it collapsed inside. The image of pregnant Sophie haunted her like a ghost. That was the height of betrayal. The last nail in the coffin of a marriage that was already dead. And she could no longer feign strength. It was in pieces. But in the midst of these pieces, there was something new emerging. A new kind of love. Not by others, but by itself. Telling her family was harder than Emily imagined. Not because of shame, because she was not to blame, but because of the pain of reliving everything out loud. It was like tearing the seams out of a cut that was still open. It started with Grace, his sister, in a quiet cafe 2 days after Christmas. Emily could barely hold the cup, and her voice came out cracking as she said, "Michael betrayed me." With Sophie, Grace, it took a few seconds to react. Then came the explosion: incredulity, anger, indignation. Emily saw in her sister's eyes the pain of someone who also felt betrayed, not only by the situation, but by not having noticed anything. When she told her about Sophie's pregnancy, Grace pressed her lips together, as if holding back her own scream, and said, "This is more than betrayal. This is perversity." Peter, Grace's husband, was also shocked. He remembered that Sophie had spent the last holiday with them, laughing, making small talk as if she were part of the family. Betrayal, at that point, was no longer just marital or between friends. It was a community wound. Everyone felt cheated. All were affected in some way. And that, for Emily, only added to the weight of the fall. Because now she carried not only personal pain, but the shame of others, the compassion of others, the sad looks of those who do not know how to console. The worst part was with Michael's family. Donna, her mother-in-law, was silent for a long time when she found out. Emily knew that, despite all the differences, the relationship between them was one of mutual respect. When she finally spoke, Donna was teary-eyed. "I didn't raise my son for this," he said in a choked voice. "I'm sorry, my dear. You didn't deserve this." Henry, the father-in-law, was more direct. "He's going to regret it, sooner or later." But these words brought no consolation. Because other people's regret never rebuilds what was destroyed inside us. The following days were the quietest of Emily's life. The house, once full of Christmas songs, laughter and conversations on the phone, was now a space echoing nostalgia. "I don't miss Michael, but I miss who she was before everything collapsed." The mornings were long, the coffees tasteless, the mirrors avoided. Sleeping was difficult. Eating, an effort, and time seemed to laugh at his pain, dragging itself cruelly between the hands of the clock. She tried to occupy her mind. She read, she put things away, she organized drawers. But nothing really worked, because the heart was still stuck in December. There was also the silent humiliation, the embarrassment of meeting acquaintances on the street and realizing that they already knew. The looks of pity, the hugs are too long, the messages on the cell phone of strength, "You are an amazing woman." Emily thanked her, smiled, answered politely. But inside, I just wanted everything to stop. I wanted silence. I wanted to disappear. I wish I could sleep for weeks and wake up in a world where all of this had been just a nightmare. But even in the midst of pain, the soul seeks shelter. And Emily began to write. Not public texts, no letters to Michael or Sophie. He wrote for himself. Daily. Reflections. Screams in the form of words. And there, in that intimate space, she began to realize that there was still something whole inside her. Something that, even wounded, he resisted. Something that would not let that story define who she was. She also started going out for a walk on her own. At first, with short steps, as if afraid of being seen. Then, more firmly. Portland, with its charming winter melancholy, seemed to understand her state of mind. The bare trees, the wet sidewalks, the heavy coats of the people, everything reflected what she felt inside. But it was on walks that the air returned to the lungs. And little by little, the certainty emerged. What collapsed was not the end. It was the beginning of something new. And this new, although painful, was hers. It was early in the morning when Emily finally made the decision. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, in silence, with the whole house plunged into a welcoming and cruel gloom. She looked around as if observing the ruins of a castle that she herself built with love, detail by detail. The walls she painted herself. The paintings he chose with care. The potted plants he watered every Sunday. All that now looked like the set of an abandoned theater. And she, the last actress on the scene. It was at that moment that he understood. He could no longer live in a place where the ground carries the footprints of lies. The decision to leave was not easy. It was the opposite of what she had always believed. Emily was the woman who remained, who fought, who sustained, even wounded. But now, to remain there would be like sleeping in a burning house waiting for the fire to have mercy. She needed to breathe. I needed a new roof. Of walls where silence did not echo betrayals. From a bed where she could sleep without imagining kisses that were not given to her. It was time to go. Not out of weakness, but out of dignity. For self-preservation. Out of respect for the woman who still existed under the rubble. He started packing his bags at 3 in the morning. In silence. He picked up each piece of clothing as if he touched memories. The blouse from the first date, the wedding anniversary dress, the coat she wore last Christmas with the family. Each object was a memory, a proof that it existed in its entirety inside. But now, each of these items needed to be removed as part of a liberation ritual. Emily folded everything calmly, but inside, it was as if she were packing pieces of her own soul. Hurt, but at the same time, healed. He didn't take everything, just what is necessary. Some clothes, documents, the diary where she had been writing for the last few days, and a small photo frame with a photo of her and Grace as children. The rest. He was left behind. He left Michael the furniture, the books, the coffee maker he loved, even his favorite mug. Because, at that moment, I didn't want things. He wanted peace. I wanted the relief of opening a new door without having to carry old weights. The essentials were now light. It fit in the trunk. It fit the heart that, although wounded, was beginning to rebuild itself. Before leaving, he made one last coffee. He sat down at the table. He looked at the empty kitchen and took a deep breath. The silence of that dawn was different. It didn't hurt like on other days. It was a mature silence. A silence of an end. And a new beginning. Emily didn't cry. She was calm. Strong. She only allowed herself to stay there for a few more minutes, listening to the sound of the clock on the wall and feeling the smell of coffee spread like a last wave of the house that was no longer hers. As he left, he locked the door with firm hands. He put the key in the envelope and left it on the entrance mat. I wouldn't write notes. I would not leave words. Michael didn't deserve his goodbyes. What needed to be said had already been said, with actions. And sometimes, the greatest cry of strength is the silence of those who leave without looking back. In the car, with her bags in the back seat, Emily started without hesitation. He drove through sleepy streets, breathing in the icy air of Portland as if it were for the first time. It was strange, of course. Scary, even. But it was also liberating. Because, for the first time in a long time, she was in control. Not a marriage. Not a friendship. But of life itself. And there, under the pale streetlight and the heavy winter sky, Emily didn't know where exactly she was going. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was leaving behind everything that tried to destroy her. And that, in itself, it was already a renaissance. The first night away from home was spent in the guest room of his sister, Grace. A small but cozy space, with flowery bedspreads, books on the shelves, and the smell of lavender in the air. When Emily arrived, she didn't have to say anything. Grace just opened her arms and hugged her tightly, as if holding someone's pieces trying not to let them fall. Emily collapsed right there in the hallway. She cried silently, her face buried in her sister's shoulder. It was no longer the cry of revolt. It was the cry of someone who, for the first time in days, felt safe enough to collapse completely. In the early days, Grace was everything. The sister, the emotional nurse, the attentive cook, the silent therapist. He prepared hot teas at night, put on soft music to play in the morning, left notes glued to the mirror with phrases like, "You are stronger than you think." He didn't ask questions. It only offered presence. Emily, even in pieces, felt her soul rest little by little. It wasn't healing yet, but it was rest. And rest is the first step for those who have carried so much for so long. The conversations came slowly. They started with shared silences on the couch, then evolved into short outbursts. Emily spoke little, but the little she said carried tons. And Grace knew how to listen. He listened with his eyes, with his body, with his heart. He knew exactly when to touch the arm and when to just keep the cup full. Gradually, Emily began to tell things that even she had not been able to organize herself. He spoke of the looks he ignored, the signs he chose to silence, the dreams he had to kill in secret. And there, listening to her sister, she recovered a forgotten piece of herself. Grace's presence was like an anchor in the midst of the storm. She reminded Emily of who she was before marriage, before the pain, before the betrayal. I remembered the girl who painted watercolors on Sundays, who loved to dance in the kitchen, who dreamed of opening a small bookstore with a cafe in the background. Emily rediscovered these memories as if they were old photographs rediscovered in a forgotten box. And with each memory, a breath of identity pulsated again. One day, Grace took her to a trail outside Portland. It was winter, but the air was light and the sky clear. They walked in silence for a few minutes, until Emily stopped in front of a frozen lake. He looked at the pale reflection in the water and said, "I have lost myself." Grace replied without hesitation, "No, you've been ripped away, but it's coming back, little by little, and it will come back stronger than ever." Those words resonated for days in Emily's mind. Because of all the truths, perhaps this was the most liberating. She had not failed. She had survived. Over time, Emily began to create small routines. He made his own coffee, read for 30 minutes, walked with Grace in the late afternoon. Simple things, but that gave back the feeling of control. He also returned to writing more frequently. But now, not only as an escape valve. He wrote with intention. I wrote to understand. He wrote to rebuild himself. His texts began to gain the tone of chronicle, reflection, and teaching. She didn't know it yet, but those words would be seeds of something bigger down the road. One night, sitting on the couch, Grace held his hand and said, "One day, you'll still be thankful for all this." Emily didn't answer. Not at that moment, because it still hurt too much. But deep down, a part of her was beginning to believe. Not because the pain was less, but because now she no longer carried it alone. I had a lap. There was listening. There was light. And there, wrapped in blankets and the warmth of true love, Emily felt, for the first time since the beginning of everything, that she could, indeed, be whole again. A year later, Portland looked the same biting cold, the streets covered in snow, the windows decorated with lights and gold ribbons. But inside Emily, everything had changed. Deeply. She walked along the sidewalks with firmer steps, wearing a burgundy coat she had bought for herself as a symbolic gift. It wasn't just clothes, it was armor. Her face, now more serene, brought a new beauty. She was not the same woman who cried silently by the bedside. It was someone reborn, healed not because she forgot the pain, but because she made it a bridge. He made it a seed. He made it history. On the morning of the new Christmas, Emily woke up with no weight in her chest. He made his coffee, put on some quiet music to play, and opened the windows of the new house. Small, simple, but full of peace. The walls, still smelling of fresh paint, reflected her new phase. Blank spaces to rewrite her own history. She had rented that apartment 2 months ago and, for the first time in a long time, she was alone. By choice. Not because she was left, but because she learned that her own company can also be home. As she prepared lunch, she remembered past Christmases, the bountiful tables, the forced laughter, the presence of those who no longer loved her. And for the first time, those memories didn't come as stabs. They came like old pages of a book that she no longer needed to reread. Did you miss it? Yes. But not of those people. He missed the woman who believed in love, who set up the tree with hope, who prepared everything with a twinkle in her eyes. And then, in a symbolic gesture, he bought a small tree, assembled it by himself, and hung a single ornament, a star with his name on it. In the late afternoon, he received Grace and Peter for an intimate supper. No exaggeration, just heartfelt laughter, glasses held up with pride, and a new tradition, writing notes of gratitude and hanging them on the tree. Emily wrote her in silence. When Grace asked what she had written, she replied with a calm smile. I wrote, "Thank you for falling. I needed to get up differently." Grace smiled back. And in that gesture, everything was. The night went on calmly, without surprises, without haste. And it was precisely in this simplicity that Emily found a new meaning for Christmas. It was no longer about decorations, or dinners, or golden ribbons. It was about a new beginning, about being reborn, about recognizing in the mirror the woman who had gone through hell, and even so, she kept the sweetness in her eyes. Before going to sleep, Emily wrote one more page in her diary. He talked about forgiveness, about choices, about how self-love can be silent and yet revolutionary. He ended with a phrase that, from then on, would guide all his next Decembers. Sometimes, Christmas destroys, and then reveal who you really are. And that night, when she laid her head on the pillow, Emily was in no pain. He carried peace. And that, after all, was the greatest miracle of all. Maybe you're listening to this story with a heavy heart. Maybe you've been through something similar. Or worse, maybe you're living it right now, with your eyes full of doubts and your chest full of silence. And if that's the case, breathe. Because I need to tell you something that no one told me back then. You're going to survive. Yes, the floor will disappear. People will let you down. Love will disguise itself as a lie. And when all seems lost, you'll feel like you've broken yourself in a way that there's no turning back. But it does. And the return, honey, begins with a choice. Stop asking yourself, why did they do this to me? And start asking yourself, what am I going to do with this now? Emily discovered this by force. Between empty messages and silences full of pain, she found something she had never seen, her own value. He discovered that too much loyalty in the wrong place only generates scars, and that leaving a house can hurt, but staying can kill you inside. She didn't pay lip service. She didn't rebuild it out of pride. It was reborn from the inside out, step by step. Because you understood that no one can give you what you yourself don't allow yourself to have: respect, truth, peace. And now I ask you, what are you still trying to save? That sank you a long time ago? Who would you be if you had the courage to choose yourself for the first time? What if the Christmas that broke your heart is the same one that ignites your new story? If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. She writes here in the comments, I deserve more than they gave me. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and help me spread this message. Because in the end, Christmas was not only made of ties, it is also made of cuts. But it's these cuts that truly reveal to us